The sun hung low over the Pacific, casting a fiery glow on the tumultuous waters surrounding Okinawa. The roar of aircraft engines filled the air, blending with the distant thunder of artillery. Sailors aboard destroyers, mere silhouettes against the horizon, braced themselves for the chaos that was about to unfold. They knew the stakes, their lives against the relentless tide of kamikazes, a desperate tactic born of desperation and zeal. How could such valor exist in the face of certain death? In the grand theater of war, where strategies were forged and fates were sealed, this paradox of courage became a defining force. This episode isn't about the individual heroics of sailors or the technology of the time. It's about the invisible force that decides wars. In the spring of 1945, the world was entrenched in the final stages of World War II. The Pacific Theater had become a battleground defined by attrition, with both American and Japanese forces locked in a fierce struggle. The Battle of Okinawa, which began on April 1st, was seen as a crucial step toward the eventual invasion of the Japanese mainland. For the United States, victory was imperative. It would provide a strategic base for a further assault and could hasten the end of the war. Meanwhile, the Japanese military was fighting for survival, knowing that failure would likely lead to their complete annihilation. The prevailing belief among military leaders was that naval superiority would dictate the outcome of the conflict. American forces relied heavily on their advanced technology and overwhelming numbers, while Japanese strategies were rooted in a fierce commitment to honor and sacrifice. The kamikaze tactic emerged as a desperate yet effective measure for the Japanese, aimed at inflicting maximum damage on U.S. naval ships. For both sides, the expectations were clear. The United States would dominate through sheer force, while Japan would defend itself with unwavering resolve. However, the reality of warfare was much more complex. The U.S. Navy had developed strong doctrines that emphasized air superiority and coordinated attacks, reflecting a confidence in their technological advancements. In contrast, Japanese forces were often hampered by their rigid adherence to traditional military strategies and underestimations of American capabilities. This disparity played a significant role in shaping the dynamics of the battle. As the battle commenced, the United States faced numerous challenges. The terrain of Okinawa was unforgiving, with its rugged landscape providing ample cover for Japanese defenders. The Americans had anticipated a quick victory, but the fierce resistance they encountered forced them to adapt their strategies. Meanwhile, the Japanese command underestimated the relentless determination of American sailors and pilots, believing that their kamikaze attacks would be sufficient to turn the tide. In the early days of the battle, the Japanese launched waves of kamikaze aircraft against the American fleet, resulting in significant damage to several ships. This tactic, while initially effective, began to reveal the limitations of the Japanese strategy. Despite their courage and sacrifice, the kamikaze pilots were often met with superior American anti-aircraft defenses and fighter cover, which gradually diminished their effectiveness. The U.S. Navy's response was swift and decisive. They adapted their tactics to counter the kamikaze threat, employing advanced radar technology and coordinated air patrols. This adaptability showcased a fundamental difference in approach between the two forces. While the Japanese relied on traditional tactics and a code of honor, the Americans embraced innovation and flexibility in the face of adversity. As the battle raged on, American forces began to realize that the key to victory lay not only in numbers, but in the ability to learn and adapt. This understanding marked a turning point in the conflict, as U.S. commanders adjusted their strategies in response to the evolving battlefield conditions. The Japanese, however, remained steadfast in their beliefs, failing to recognize the shifting tides of warfare. In the end, the battle for Okinawa would not be defined solely by the bravery of individual soldiers or the tactics employed. Instead, It would be a testament to the importance of adaptability and foresight in the face of overwhelming odds. The clash of ideologies and strategies would reveal the fundamental flaws in the Japanese approach, setting the stage for the eventual outcome of the war. The Japanese military's underestimation of American resolve and innovation proved to be a critical blind spot. Central to this miscalculation was a cultural perception that equated honor and sacrifice with military success. The kamikaze pilots, revered for their willingness to die for the emperor, were seen as the embodiment of Japan's martial spirit. However, this valor did not account for the technological advancements and strategic flexibility possessed by American forces. Japanese commanders failed to grasp the extent of U.S. industrial capacity and its ability to replenish losses. While they recognized American numbers, they underestimated the speed at which the U.S. Navy could replace ships and aircraft. This oversight was compounded by a lack of understanding of American morale, which remained high despite the challenges faced at Okinawa. The belief that American forces would falter in the face of determined resistance was a fundamental error. Additionally, the Japanese High Command adhered to rigid military doctrines that stifled innovation. The reliance on traditional tactics, such as massed air attacks, did not allow for the flexibility needed to counter the evolving American strategies. This inflexibility became increasingly apparent as American forces adapted their tactics to deal with the kamikaze threat, utilizing effective countermeasures that the Japanese had not anticipated. The psychological dimension also played a significant role in the Japanese miscalculation. The belief that their enemy would break under pressure led to a dangerous complacency. As the battle progressed, the realization that American resolve was unyielding became a source of shock and despair for Japanese commanders. This disconnect between expectation and reality created a significant advantage for the U.S. forces. Furthermore, the Japanese military's reliance on a few key leaders meant that strategic decisions were often made without input from those on the ground. This lack of communication led to a failure to adapt to the dynamic battlefield conditions. American forces, in contrast, benefited from a decentralized command structure that encouraged initiative and responsiveness. This cultural difference ultimately became a decisive factor in the conflict. As the U.S. Navy honed its tactics, the Japanese remained committed to their initial strategies. The inflexible application of the kamikaze tactic, while initially devastating, became less effective as American forces adapted to counter it. This inability to pivot in response to changing circumstances highlighted a critical flaw in Japanese military thinking. The Japanese command also underestimated the impact of technological advancements on naval warfare. While they had some effective aircraft, they could not match the comprehensive air superiority achieved by the Americans. This technological gap became increasingly apparent as the battle wore on, contributing to a growing sense of desperation among Japanese forces. In hindsight, the Japanese military's strategic errors were rooted in a combination of cultural beliefs, rigid doctrines, and an underestimation of their adversary. The failure to recognize the evolving nature of warfare at Okinawa ultimately sealed their fate. This blind spot would resonate throughout the remainder of the war, leading to a series of devastating defeats. Ultimately, the clash at Okinawa underscored the importance of adaptability and foresight in military strategy. The lessons learned from this battle would shape future conflicts, as both sides examined the factors that led to their respective successes and failures. The technological innovations that emerged during World War II played a crucial role in determining the outcome of the Battle of Okinawa. Central to the U.S. Navy's success was the development of advanced radar systems, which significantly enhanced their ability to detect incoming threats. This technology provided a critical advantage by allowing American forces to anticipate and respond to kamikaze attacks more effectively. The first pillar of this technological advantage was the integration of radar into naval operations. U.S. ships were equipped with sophisticated radar systems that could detect aircraft at greater distances than previously possible. This early warning capability allowed American sailors to prepare for incoming attacks, enabling them to deploy defensive measures and engage enemy aircraft before they reached their targets. The second pillar was the coordination of air support. The U.S. Navy developed a comprehensive system for integrating land-based and carrier-based aircraft into a cohesive fighting force. This coordination allowed for rapid responses to kamikaze threats, as fighter planes could be deployed quickly to intercept incoming aircraft. This level of coordination was unmatched by the Japanese, who struggled to effectively manage their own air operations. The third pillar was the emphasis on training and preparedness. U.S. naval personnel underwent rigorous training to familiarize themselves with the new technologies and tactics. This level of preparation enabled American forces to operate their equipment effectively under the intense conditions of battle. In contrast, the Japanese forces faced challenges in adapting to the evolving nature of naval warfare, leading to a disadvantage on the battlefield. The practical application of these technologies translated into tangible battlefield advantages. The effectiveness of American radar systems meant that kamikaze pilots faced increasingly difficult odds. As they approached U.S. ships, they were often met with a wall of anti-aircraft fire and intercepting fighters, significantly diminishing their chances of success. The Japanese, on the other hand, struggled to match the technological capabilities of their adversary. Despite their bravery, kamikaze pilots were often poorly equipped, flying outdated aircraft that lacked the speed and agility of their American counterparts. This technological disparity became increasingly evident as the battle progressed, contributing to the effectiveness of U.S. defensive operations. Moreover, the ability to quickly replace aircraft and ships further compounded the challenges faced by Japanese forces. The U.S. industrial base was capable of producing war materials at an unprecedented rate, allowing American forces to recover from losses sustained during the battle. This logistical advantage enabled the U.S. Navy to maintain operational tempo, while the Japanese faced dwindling resources and mounting casualties. The combination of advanced technology, effective coordination, and superior training created a potent force that the Japanese could not effectively counter. As the battle unfolded, the gap between American and Japanese capabilities became a decisive factor in determining the outcome. The Japanese miscalculation regarding the technological landscape contributed significantly to their eventual defeat. Ultimately, the technological advancements employed by the U.S. Navy at Okinawa demonstrated the critical role that innovation plays in warfare. The lessons learned from this battle would resonate in future conflicts, as military leaders recognized the importance of adapting to new technologies and integrating them into their strategies. On April 1, 1945, the U.S. Navy launched its invasion of Okinawa, marking the beginning of one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific theater. The air was thick with tension as American forces approached the island, bracing for fierce resistance from entrenched Japanese positions. The sound of gunfire began to echo across the landscape as troops landed on the beaches, facing a well-prepared enemy determined to defend their homeland. As the battle progressed, the first waves of kamikaze attacks struck the American fleet. Sailors on destroyers scrambled to man their stations, the piercing wails of sirens signaling the imminent threat. The sight of enemy aircraft diving toward their ships filled their hearts with dread. In those moments, the camaraderie among the sailors intensified, each man acutely aware of the stakes. The Japanese pilots, driven by a sense of duty and desperation, launched their attacks with unwavering resolve. However, the U.S. Navy's radar systems quickly alerted sailors to the incoming threats. As aircraft approached, anti-aircraft guns thundered to life, sending a barrage of shells into the sky. The once momentous charge of the kamikaze pilots began to falter under the weight of American firepower. In one critical moment, a kamikaze plane veered toward the USS Franklin, an aircraft carrier. Sailors on deck braced for impact as the aircraft hurtled toward them. Just as the plane was about to strike, a swarm of American fighter planes swooped in, intercepting the enemy aircraft mere seconds before it could unleash its deadly payload. The crew erupted into cheers, a testament to their resilience and training. The turning point came when U.S. forces adapted their tactics in response to the relentless kamikaze attacks. They began to coordinate air cover more effectively and deployed fighter planes in greater numbers to intercept incoming threats. This strategic adjustment shifted the momentum in favor of the Americans, demoralizing the Japanese pilots as their attacks became increasingly futile. As the days wore on, the realization began to dawn on Japanese commanders that their tactics were failing. The overwhelming resilience of American forces, combined with their adaptability, shattered the myth of invincibility that had buoyed Japanese morale. The psychological toll of these losses became evident as the once determined kamikaze pilots faced a grim reality. They could no longer turn the tide of battle. With each passing day, the battle for Okinawa showcased the importance of flexibility in military strategy. The U.S. Navy's ability to learn and adapt in real time contrasted sharply with the Japanese reliance on traditional tactics. As American forces pushed deeper into the island, the futility of the kamikaze attacks became clear, leading to a devastating realization for the Japanese. Victory was no longer within reach. The culmination of the Battle of Okinawa would not only mark a significant turning point in the Pacific War, but it would also serve as a stark reminder of the consequences of underestimating an adversary. The sacrifice of countless soldiers on both sides underscored the harsh realities of war, where courage and innovation often determined the outcome. The arithmetic of victory in the Battle of Okinawa reveals a stark contrast in the resources and capabilities of the opposing forces. The United States deployed a massive naval fleet, which included over 1,300 ships to support the invasion. This overwhelming number provided the U.S. Navy with a logistical advantage that allowed for sustained operations over an extended period. In terms of air power, the U.S. launched approximately 4,000 aircraft during the battle, far outnumbering the Japanese forces, which had around 200 operational planes at their disposal. This disparity in air support meant that American fighters could consistently engage and intercept kamikaze attacks before they reached their targets. The effectiveness of the U.S. air cover was a significant factor in minimizing damage to the fleet. Logistics also played a crucial role in determining the outcome of the battle. American supply lines were robust, enabling the continuous flow of ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements to the front lines. Records indicate that U.S. forces consumed over 1.5 million gallons of fuel daily during the peak of the battle, allowing them to sustain their operations without interruption. In contrast, Japanese resources were dwindling, hampered by the blockade imposed by American naval forces. The casualty rates during the battle further illustrate the disparity in resources. The United States suffered approximately 12,500 killed and 36,000 wounded, while Japanese forces faced staggering losses, with estimates of up to 110,000 dead, including combatants and civilians. The sheer scale of the losses on both sides highlighted the brutal reality of warfare, but it also underscored the effectiveness of the American strategy. Furthermore, the production capabilities of the United States during the war were unmatched. By 1945, American factories were producing ships and aircraft at an unprecedented rate, allowing for rapid replenishment of lost resources. This ability to replace losses meant that American forces could maintain their momentum, while the Japanese were unable to recover from their setbacks. The Japanese Navy, already weakened by previous battles, struggled to replace their aircraft and ships. The lack of resources and industrial capacity meant that they could not sustain their kamikaze tactics in the face of American advancements. This logistical disadvantage became increasingly apparent as the battle progressed and the tide turned against them. The U.S. Navy's ability to adapt to the challenges posed by kamikaze attacks further amplified their advantages. American commanders utilized innovative strategies and technologies to respond to the evolving battlefield conditions, demonstrating the importance of flexibility in warfare. This adaptability contributed to the growing sense of inevitability surrounding the outcome of the battle. Ultimately, the arithmetic of victory at Okinawa illustrates how numbers and resources shaped the conflict. The U.S. Navy's overwhelming superiority in ships, aircraft, logistics, and production capabilities became decisive factors, solidifying their dominance in the Pacific theater. As the battle unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the combination of technology, strategy, and resources would determine the fate of both sides. The Battle of Okinawa had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate conflict, influencing military doctrine and shaping the post-war world. The sheer scale of the battle and the losses incurred led to a re-evaluation of strategies employed by both the United States and Japan. The U.S. Navy's success in adapting to the kamikaze threat highlighted the importance of flexibility and innovation in military operations. In Japan, the staggering losses during the battle contributed to a growing disillusionment with the military leadership. The failure of the kamikaze tactic to achieve its intended outcomes shattered the myth of invincibility that had long defined Japanese military culture. This realization prompted a critical reassessment of strategies as the nation faced the impending collapse of its imperial ambitions. For the United States, the lessons learned from Okinawa would influence military strategies in subsequent conflicts. The effective coordination of air and naval forces, as well as the emphasis on technological superiority, became central tenets of U.S. military doctrine. The adaptability demonstrated during the battle would serve as a model for future operations, reinforcing the need for continuous innovation in the face of evolving threats. The battle also highlighted the human cost of warfare, serving as a grim reminder of the sacrifices made by soldiers on both sides. The devastation witnessed at Okinawa underscored the need for a more humane approach to conflict resolution in the post-war era. This recognition would contribute to the establishment of new international norms aimed at preventing future atrocities. Moreover, the impact of the Battle of Okinawa rippled through the Pacific region, shaping the geopolitical landscape for decades to come. The victory solidified U.S. dominance in the region, paving the way for the eventual occupation of Japan. The subsequent peace negotiations and reconstruction efforts would redefine U.S.-Japan relations, transforming former adversaries into allies. The battle also had lasting implications for military strategy in the context of air and naval warfare. The lessons learned from the kamikaze attacks prompted a re-evaluation of air defense systems and the need for improved technologies to counter similar threats in the future. This focus on adapting to new forms of warfare became a cornerstone of military planning in the years following the conflict. As the world emerged from the shadows of World War II, the legacy of the Battle of Okinawa remained ever present. The sacrifices made by soldiers and civilians alike served as a stark reminder of the costs of war. This recognition would shape discussions surrounding military engagement and the pursuit of peace in the years to come. Ultimately, the systemic consequences of the Battle of Okinawa extended beyond the battlefield. the re-evaluation of military doctrine, the shifting geopolitical landscape, and the enduring impact on US-Japan relations would all be influenced by the lessons learned during this pivotal conflict. The question of how courage can exist in the face of certain death takes on new meaning when viewed through the lens of the Battle of Okinawa. It was not merely the bravery of individual soldiers that determined the outcome, but rather the system of strategies, technologies, and adaptability that defined the US Navy's approach. It wasn't the best ships or the most valiant pilots that won. It was the best system. What lessons from Okinawa continue to resonate in modern warfare and military strategy?